Hello everyone, welcome to SC2 Noob School. This is going to be the first in a series of 4 what I'm calling fundamental videos, where we're going to be talking about some of the big concepts that you need to know in order to become a good StarCraft 2 player. The type of player that this is for someone who has possibly played through the single player campaign when it comes out. They know basic tech tree things, they know basic unit counters, things like that, but they really don't know how to actually get good at StarCraft 2. So it's going to be 4 different videos. This video is going to be about macro. The second video we're going to talk about scouting techniques and the importance of that is to the game. The video after that, the third video, will be about micro and how micro techniques can really turn the tide of a battle. And then the last video is going to be about timings and build orders and how those kind of fit together in an online match. And then after I do these fundamental videos, I want to go into some of the more advanced techniques, those thousands of small things that you can do in a StarCraft game, that the more of those that you know, the overall better player you'll be. So let's go ahead and get started with macro. So the first thing we need to talking about macro, is that StarCraft is, more so than any other RTS that's out right now, is an economy-based game. Newer games like Dawn of War or Command & Conquer really de-emphasize the economy aspect and put more emphasis on troop movement, tactics, and things like that. So that's one thing you have to really get used to with StarCraft, is that economy makes a big difference. And the reason I'm showing you this video in ×3 speed right now is to show you one of the core ideas of having good macro is constant worker production. At your Nexus or your command center or your hatchery, you need to be pretty much throughout the entire game creating more workers, because if you can have a bigger economy than your opponent, ultimately that means you're going to have more units than your opponent. So this idea of constantly making workers is actually especially important at the beginning of the game. You should be trying to figure out what kinds of things you can get away with while you're still making constant workers. So you should be making workers and then looking at your supply and saying, oh look, it looks like I can squeeze in a supply depot here. And then, oh, I can build a barracks around this time while still making workers. And as we're watching this White Raw replay, I just want you to be noticing the Nexus and seeing how pretty much constantly it's producing workers. There's some gaps here and there where maybe he's microing units around, or he just wants to save minerals for a few seconds so we can get more units out. There's always exceptions to these rules, but in general, constant workers is a good idea. So the next thing we're going to talk about when dealing with having good macro, once you've got those constant workers being produced, you'll probably notice that your money is just getting incredibly high, higher than you can actually spend it. So that's the second thing that I'm going to recommend, is trying to keep money low. And in particular, when I'm talking about keeping money low, I'm mainly thinking about gas, because gas is really the resource that is the bottleneck in most high-tech builds. It's the resource that determines how much technology you can get. So in this Noni replay, I just want you to watch how precise Noni is with using his gas. You see, he got his gas there, and then we're going to watch his gas slowly build up to 100. And the way he's got this build timed out, he gets a zealot out at around, oh, I don't know, 20. It's not important to know exactly what the time is, but he gets a zealot out, and then right then his gas is getting about to 100, the zealot comes out, and immediately he can pop out a sentry. So that's one of those things you need to know, is when you get this assimilator, when are you going to have enough gas for a sentry? And furthermore, going through this timing, you'll see his gas is getting close to 50. As soon as it gets to 50, warp gate goes down. So this is just showing a really good player. They're aware of how much gas they have and how much gas they need, and they don't get any gas before they actually need it. So if we pop over here to the Zerg player, we see the Zerg just put 2 extractors up, and he's putting 3 drones in gas, and we'll just see what he's doing with his gas. Actually, we're going to see a good thing and a bad thing from this Zerg player, so there will be a lot to learn. So the Zerg's gas is getting to 100, and right after it gets to 100, there goes down his lair. Now for the rest of this game, I'm just going to forward through this a little bit. This shows something that you shouldn't do. What you're going to see is this Zerg player lets his gas just build up to huge amounts, and he's not using any of it. So if you're building up gas and not using it, Really what you should be doing is taking those drones that are in the gas geysers and putting them back on minerals until you can spend your gas. I will say this is a little more forgivable for a Zerg player, because a Zerg player can just spend a ton of gas at one time. Lots of times you'll see people maybe build up like 600 gas or something and then instantly spawn out 6 Mutalisks. It's a little more excusable for Zerg players, but for the other races, keeping your gas as low as possible is really important. So the last thing I want to talk about, and this is probably the most important, is if we're trying to build a house and the bricks we're using are constantly making workers and keeping our money low, the mortar that holds that together is good use of this thing. Good use of your keyboard is the thing that's going to allow you to do both of those things, because really you're going to need a lot of actions to keep both of those things happening, and you can do things with your keyboard a lot faster than you can click something with your mouse. So really what this comes down to is you need to use shortcuts, hotkeys, and multitasking. Shortcuts are easy. All you have to do is whenever you're tempted to click on one of those buttons on the lower right to build a unit, instead just mouse over the unit and then hit the button on the keyboard, and that'll get you used to using those shortcuts. You'll learn them in time, it's not very hard. The next thing you need to learn is using hotkeys. Now this is a little more difficult because no one can tell you exactly what the best hotkey setup for you is. You need to figure out something that just works for you, that allows you to use all of your units, put your, maybe put all of your army on one hotkey, and then all your buildings on another hotkey, and as you get better at using hotkeys, start dividing it up more, and the more things you can have assigned to hotkeys, the faster you can get to those things. So I'm going to tell you my hotkey setup for Terran. I'm not saying this is the best hotkey setup at all. This is just what I use. Really, you should just experiment around and find something that works for you. I use 1 for my command centers, all of them. I use 2 for my barracks, and I use 3 for factories and starports. And then 4, I generally have the large cluster of my army. 5, I'll just have either a small subsection of that army, or I'll keep air units on 5. And then 6 will generally be a spellcaster, like a ghost or a raven. So I'm not saying use this, I'm not saying mine is any good for you. It works for me because I feel like doing 4A, 5A, 6A is a lot easier to me than doing 1A, 2A, 3A. But it's whatever works for you. And then the last thing I want to talk about is multitasking. Multitasking is one of those things that just kind of comes with time. You just get faster at playing the game, you get more comfortable with your hotkeys and the shortcuts, and you can do more things faster. That mental checklist that goes on in your head gets more and more accurate, so all of a sudden something will go off and you'll say, I need to build another drone, or I need to go build another zealot, or I bet my gateway is almost done, or I bet my barracks is almost done and I need to get a tech lab. Multitasking is just the ability to juggle all these things in the air at once, and that really just happens with a lot of practice. So the last thing I want to do is I have a replay of Noni playing. This is actually the game we just watched, and there's a piece of it that I think really illustrates a lot of these points I'm talking about. So I'm going to hit play, and what you're going to see here is just a really good example of, first of all, Noni just being awesome and keeping really level-headed when a semi-crisis situation is handed to him. And also he demonstrates the other points we're talking about. So you see these Zerglings going in for a little fight. Okay, then they break into his base, and what is Noni doing as these Zerglings are running in? He selects his Nexus, makes a probe, and chrono boosts it. In the middle of all this chaos of units coming into his base ready to kill his probe line, he's still constantly making workers and keeping his money low while using shortcuts and hotkeys, all the while multitasking. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the lesson. I'm going to be doing some more videos. I'm going to finish up this fundamental series, and if these seem a little basic to you, stick around. After that I'm going to start doing some more advanced videos. So everyone subscribe to me, and if you want to leave me a comment on my YouTube page, I'd be happy to answer you. And I'll see you next time on SC2 Noob School.